Hello, fellow ninjas. Welcome to our Like a Ninja stream. I'm here with our field CTO and ninja guru extraordinaire, Jeff Hunter. Um, Today, we're just going to go all in on policies and conditions, which is always a topic of much enthusiasm and a lot of questions. So get your questions ready. And Jeff, let's go dive into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So good. I think you can see my screen here. So we are talking about policies today. We are going to start with some of the basics. So if you've been at Ninja for more than, let's say, 30 minutes, you have probably at some point encountered a policy setting. You either had to configure a policy setting, you've been impacted by a policy setting. That's how fundamental the policy is to the operation of the platform. It's sort of impossible to get away from. And as a consequence, if you set up your policies in a way that matches your workflows, everything can be very streamlined and very efficient. And if you do not do that, your life can be very difficult and things can be very slow. And we have to go back and do good work, but do it again, which is one of my least favorite things. So we're going to start with some of the basics. I know that sometimes people will watch this in the future, so hopefully they find some value in this. But I do think we'll get a little bit more advanced as we go through everything. So again, if you're old hat at this, apologize for some of the basic stuff, but I promise we'll get into some of the more advanced aspects of policies a little later on. And then maybe at the end, if we have time, we can discuss what some of the future enhancements are to policies that are going to hopefully be available in at least an alpha state here in our next release. So with that, let's actually go into the policy settings. We're going to go to administration and then into policies here. Now, I have quite a few policies, but if you are starting from scratch in a brand new NinjaOne environment, you're only going to have six. You will see the ones with the default tag right there. We've got Windows Workstation, the default policy, Windows Server, the default policy. So you get two policies out of the box for Windows devices. And then you also get those two for Mac devices. We can see Mac workstations here. You can see that we've got Linux servers, Linux policies, and then Mac servers. So workstation and server right there, that's an important distinction to know about Ninja's policies. That's a separation there that is inviolate. Like you're never going to cross the streams there with servers and workstations when it comes to policy settings. Those are always going to be distinct types. And so you can have laptops and desktops on the workstation policy, but they're not going to be able to talk to the server policy. And of course, vice versa. When you're a server on the server policy, you wouldn't be able to be assigned to a workstation type policy. And again, that applies for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. I will note here that I am under the agent policies section. And so we're going to primarily be working in here today. But from a structural perspective, anything that I say about the agent policies would also apply to the MDM policies. And then there's a little bit of variance with the NMS and the VM policies that we'll talk about, again, with time allowing some of the differences there. But most of today, we're focused on what most people are using in NinjaOne, which is the agent policies, and that's for Windows, for Mac OS, and for Linux devices. Now, I mentioned that you have those six default policies in this menu right here. Those six policies, they do not connect to each other in any way. They are wholly distinct. So if you wanted to make a change that applied across both Windows workstations and Windows servers, you would have to go into each of those policies, like I am right here, and then I would add my condition or delete my condition or add in a schedule automation. And so what would happen is all devices that are assigned to this one policy, they'd receive that change. But because there's no connectivity between these default policies, you can envision them as completely separate buildings with no connections between them. Uh, that means you then would have to go into the server policy if you want to make that change to your servers, and you have to apply it there as well. And if you're doing something that you want to apply to all of your policies for Windows, Mac, and for Linux, you would have to make six changes to each of those six distinct policy structures. Now, one of the most common big misses, one of the common big mistakes that I've seen at Ninja is creating policies for different groups of devices that need to be treated differently. For MSPs, a lot of the times this comes with different clients. And so I'll see an MSP create a policy for each individual client. But there's a key step that gets missed, which is that they create the policy without a parent. And when you create a policy without a parent, that means it is a standalone policy or a root policy. And so the problem with that is that when you create it as a standalone policy, you are adding on to that structure that we give you at the beginning, where you have 6 individual policies. If I create a policy that is just a standalone like this, and I'll create it for my Windows workstations, this would, in theory, be the 7th standalone policy that we have in that structure in a brand new environment. Now, you can see the problem there. When you create these standalone policies, when you want to make a big, wide sweeping change, they're all flat. They're all on the same level. And so that means for each of these standalone policy structures that you create, you have to actually go into each one of them to make the change that you care about. So the way that we would prefer to do this, and I say this as a preference because it's not always going to be something that you can do uh, based off of your workflows and the environment that you manage. But in my particular case, my preference, my default that I go to is that I would prefer to create an inherited policy structure. And you can see an example of this right here with Windows Workstations. At the very top, I have Windows Workstation policy. That is my overall parent. And then what I've done is I've created additional policies that inherit from that Windows Workstation policy. So right here, I would say Windows Workstations, and then my parent is the 1A Windows Workstation policy. And so what this gives me is a pyramid structure. I have the 1A policy at the very top, and then I have child policies that are below it that are inheriting all of the settings from that overall parent. Now, this means for each of these pyramids that I create, these individual policy structures, I only have to go to the top level parent, make my change there, and then that setting is going to trickle down or propagate to all the child policies that are set to inherit from that overall parent. And so you can see here that if you're working at scale, like for example, I am here, I don't want to have to go into each individual policy and make a change. It's way easier for me to go into my Windows Workstation policy here. And then all my other child policies, like Bill's Maple Leaf Diner, Herrera Technologies, the law offices, Murillo Ventures, they're all going to receive that setting. And so, where you can, I would always recommend that you try to keep your policy structures condensed as possible, as limited as possible. Um, and the reason for that is that obviously, if you don't keep a close eye on your policy structures, they quickly start to spiral out of control, and your job to manage everything becomes that much more difficult. However, we might want to condense all we can, but in some cases, it's not always going to be practical. You are going to have to create additional policy structures that might need to be treated separately from your garden variety Windows workstations and your garden variety Windows servers. And a good example of this from my own past history is point of sale systems. For me, I used to work for a movie theater chain, and I handled a lot of the actual projector equipment and the servers that play the movies and the sound systems and all of that. There's also your typical workstations and laptops that people are using, your servers, but there's also point of sales when you go to the concession stand or when you go to buy a ticket. And that system is different from a regular workstation. I would want to patch it differently. I would want to monitor and alert on different metrics. It doesn't quite fit into the neat role of a desktop, a laptop, or a server. It's kind of something distinct. And so what I would do in this particular case is I would actually create a new device role. And so I'll go into my device roles here. I'm going to go down to the bottom. Since these are running Windows, I could go ahead and make it a subset of our existing Windows Workstation roles or our existing Windows Server role. And so you can see here out of the box, you would get desktop and laptop, and then under server, you would just have Windows Server. But I've created additional policies for devices that additional device roles for devices that I need to treat distinctly inside of the policy. And so in this case, I have my API server policy and an Active Directory server policy. And so this means that I'm able to go ahead and assign a different policy to any devices that are registering in Ninja with any of these custom roles. And so if I go up to my top right here, I'll go to the plus sign, I'll add a device. I'll add a computer. And here I'll say Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. Actually, let's make it Steve's Snowboard Rentals here. I can use the device role auto selector, which just says, hey, our best guess is this is a desktop, laptop, or server. Or you can go ahead and specify the particular device role that you would want to use here. And so in this case, maybe I want to do an API server. We'll go ahead and generate that right there. Whenever this is downloaded and installed, the device is going to register in NinjaOne. It's going to be tied to the organization and the location that we see right here. And it's also going to register with the specific device role that we've given it. And this is important for policies because if we go into our organizations and we go into Steve's Snowboard Rentals, you'll see that you do have the policy section right here. And this is where you will map the policies that are assigned to devices based off of the organization that you register to or the location that you register to, as well as the device role. So the organization, the location, and the device role, those are the three criteria that Ninja uses to automatically assign policies. Now, this is the out-of-the-box setup. You can always go ahead and manually assign policies in the UI. You can do that from the devices menu. We'll take a look in just a bit. And you can also do this via the API. So if you wanted to have a third-party system that looks at certain devices, certain IP addresses, certain device roles, certain attributes and custom fields, you can then use the API to go ahead and change the policy that the device is assigned to. So you have a lot of flexibility with how you can manually assign them, but this is how the out-of-the-box automated assignment is going to work. So right here, any API server that registers, you can see that I've changed the policy from the default Windows Server policy into the API server policy. Now you can see that what I've done here is I've created all of these organization-specific policies here, and they all inherit from my parent policy. And so if I stay in that structure, that gives me a top level and it gives me a secondary level, parent-child relationship. Now, if I did not name my policies in a certain way, they would just be all over the place. Ninja does not do a very good job right now of displaying the hierarchy that you see with the policy structures. And so to counteract that, what I've done is I have created a nomenclature here so that when I name my policies, they all appear in an order that is roughly understandable at a quick glance. And so the basic structure here is very easy. Every top level policy has a number and a letter, so 1A. Anything below that, inheriting from it, you're still on that one policy structure, so it's still one, but you're on the second level, so that is the B level, so 1.B. This is the second child level right here. What if I need to go a little deeper? So for the what the heck radio station right here, I have a third level here. So this is the third level of inheritance, 1.B.0. And so that lets me know that there is something else that's going to inherit from this policy right here. And so you can see right there, this would then be the third level right here. So 1.B.1, this would be the third level inheriting from the second level, 1.B.0, which inherits from the top level, which is 1.A. I will not say that this is an ironclad naming convention that is appropriate for everybody, but it was the one that seems most universal for me. Of course, this is contingent on you being rigid about your naming convention and everybody following the same practice. So it's a good idea to maybe write up a quick document here or restrict permissions on who can create policies to the people who actually know how to do this properly. So that is the policy structure right there. Let's go ahead and actually walk through a quick example of actually creating an additional policy structure. We'll do what we talked about earlier. We're going to create a new device role under my Windows desktops and laptops. The chassis is a desktop chassis, so we're going to leave that as leave it set like this. And then we'll just type in POS for point of sale right here, and we'll add that. And so right there, you can see I have my POS. I will then go back into policies and I will create an entirely new policy here. We will call this, I think I left off at 11. So we're going to go to 11.A. And so 11.A, that is going to be the policy, the next policy that we have here. So we'll go ahead and create this. Note that your policy is not the direct device role. It is the overall parent device role. So I created my point of sale role under Windows desktops and laptops. So that's what I would select here. And by selecting that, I could transition any device that is a Windows workstation to this policy. It's not going to be just point of sales, but however, our automated mapping will be set up so that any device registering with the point of sale role is automatically going to be assigned to this policy. Note here, I am not creating a parent because I do not want any cross-pollination between my Windows workstation policy and my point of sale policy. For me and my workflows, I need those to be completely separate. I do not want anything affecting Windows workstations to cause a problem where my point of sales are going offline at the wrong time. I will tell you from past experience that is fun for nobody who is trying to help service those machines or maintain them in any way. So yeah, I absolutely want to keep my point of sale separate from any other device type, which is why I'm going against what I said earlier and creating a standalone root policy. For me, the benefit of having these separated from each other, that outweighs the additional work of having to go into a separate policy structure and make one additional change. For me, the difference there is worth it. And so we'll go ahead and create that right there. So this would be a default policy. Before I make any changes here, I'm actually going to go ahead and select my assignment. So I would go into organizations. I would go into Bill's Maple Leaf Diner, for example, and I would say under the POS right here, we actually want to use the 11.A point of sale policy. And so now any devices that register to NinjaOne, to Bill's Maple Leaf Diner with the point of sale role, they will receive this policy. If they register as a regular desktop or a regular laptop, you just need to go to the device and change the device role, and it would automatically assume the policy that we've set here, unless you've directly overridden it at the device level. If you set a direct device override, that does stick, and we will no longer listen to the organization mapping that you set here. So whenever you come to the devices menu here and you select a device and you change a policy like I'm about to right here, be aware that this is going to be a permanent override. If you later change this device role or you change the organization, it is not going to also change the policy. You can see right here, we've got a pretty clear tooltip that explains that. So just be aware that when you make those direct level changes at the device, we do assume that you mean it, and you do want to have that be a permanent uh, uh, assignation of that policy to that particular device. Oh man, what did I say that sounded like a Susan Vega song? I'm curious now. Now, that's one way to map your policies. If we go back into organizations, let's say you want to have a different policy for specific locations, like we do with the What the Heck radio station. We can then go into locations. We can go into the Houston station here, and we can say for our policies, we want to allow a policy location override to set the policy. So instead of looking at the previous menu that we looked over here on the left-hand side, you can go ahead and go down here to POS and say, hey, actually, we want to go ahead and assign the Hector's Warehouse policy, just as a basic example. Now, I know Tom's Diner is a song, but I didn't know what I said that sounded like Tom's Diner. So that's how we would go ahead and assign policies. The automated mapping, that works from the organization level. You can also have automated mapping at the location level. And then you also have the ability to go ahead and assign from the devices menu at scale. Or if we click into the actual device, we can go to settings, and then you can change the policy here. However, there's an additional option here for policy overrides. You can see right here, we have device overrides. So let's say you need to make a change to a policy setting, but you only want to make that particular change to a particular device. It seems kind of a waste to go and create an entirely different policy for one minor change and then apply that to like one or two devices. It's not ideal, right? So what we're going to do is create a device level override. We'll go ahead and edit right here. And you'll see in the top left, it says AD server. It doesn't say a policy name. And that's your sign that this is a device that you're looking at and not just a regular policy. And when you make changes here, you can see that we're inheriting everything from the policy that's assigned to this device. Any change that I make here applies to this device and this device only. It will not go anywhere else when you do this as a policy override. So for my Active Directory server here, maybe I don't need this file transfer, not really critical. So let's go ahead and uncheck that. And you'll see over here on the right-hand side, this creates an override. This makes sure that the setting is not applied to this device right here. We've overridden it. We are out of compliance with whatever our parent policy says this setting should be. And so if we make any changes to this at the overall parent level, so we go to our Windows Server policy and we make a change here, this device isn't going to receive it because it is overridden over there on the right-hand side. Robin, what are you committing me to? So what we can,
I just thought the doot sounded pretty lovely, and I just thought
uh,
that maybe um we did. I wanted to say to NL, Jeff is always available on our Discord. So if you want, I'll throw this up. Excuse us, it's gonna like go over our faces for
I'm
a second. But if you want to join our Discord, you can use that here. And so if you have more specific questions, Jeff, and then some of our wonderful, I mean, most all, I would say, of our community members are pretty wonderful, and they'll hop in to help you with more specific questions. But I did want to go
real
a
quick,
little.
Robin.
Hmm?
I just want to say, tag me.
Yeah,
I am not
yeah.
going to see you in Discord or DM me. I'm just not going to see it unless you do that.
Right. He unfortunately, Jeff has like a job that he has to do that's like, so we're lucky that he spends time in the Discord as he does, but it's true. If you want him to like see it, tag him, tag the community team. We'll always figure out ways to help you guys get the information that you want. I did, though, before you keep going any further, I did have a question as someone who I'm just here, right? I'm learning as I go along. Every time we do one of these, I'm learning more and more. Um, when you had talked about like making sure that like text, for example, not everyone should have access to these policies, right? Like, because changing a policy can really mess up whole workflows. Um, I just had a question about kind of when someone's new to Ninja or new to stepping into these kinds of roles, when is setting a policy, should that be like the first thing that they think of when they're trying to solve a problem? And like, how often are we going into the policy settings and administration and messing around with these things? Is this like set it and forget it, or do we want to constantly check back on these? I just wanted to kind of get that before we go too much deeper into actually workflows.
Yeah, too far down the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
Uh, so most of the time that you're spending in policies, you are doing that at the initial setup and the initial configuration. That's where you spend most of your time. In an ideal world, you set everything up perfectly at the inception of your NinjaOne account, and then it's a little bit like a mobile. It just kind of continuously works, and you don't really have to touch it too often. That is the goal. When the rubber hits the road, the practicality necessitates that you are going to have to make additions or changes. But in terms of reviewing policies, I would say that you don't look at the policies per se on a regular basis to solve a particular problem. You configure the policies to solve that problem before it happens. That's kind of my ideal workflow there. And so I think that there's natural adjustments to the policy that happen over time. But ideally, if you're watching this in the future, I think your goal should be to evaluate what your various device types are. We've talked about regular desktop, regular laptop, but there's other types of devices like a point of sale. I have also managed devices that are, like you use them to control a lighting dimmer and the lights inside of a building, or you use the sort of touch screen on a laptop to configure the temperature that's set for the different areas of the building. Um, so yeah, that's something you need to consider is what are your various device types? What policy settings are going to differ across those device types? Are you going to patch them at different times? Are you going to want different monitoring and alerting applied? Are there going to be different automations that need to run across those device types? These are all the considerations that I think you need to take into account and then start designing what your policy setup looks like. For me, I think it's impossible to design your policy setup without having an accurate view of what all your distinct device types are going to be. That's kind of the starting point right there. And then once you figure that out, you can say, all right, well, I have, let's say, 7 distinct device types, and therefore I need to have 7 distinct policies here. And then from there, you kind of continuously branch as you find variation across these device types and then how these devices need to be managed. And so, a good example of this, if we back out here, let's say you want to deploy patches on a sort of a gradual basis. You don't want to go ahead and approve, um, you don't want to go ahead and approve patches for every policy all in one go. And so, what I've done here with my policies on my servers, you can see I have my overall Windows Server policy right here. And then inheriting from that, I've got a couple different child policies. And so these are all 2B. These are all on the second level. One is for my domain controllers. And so right there, I can go ahead and treat those distinctly. They're going to reboot at a separate time from regular servers. They might have a more aggressive backup schedule. They might have more domain-specific conditions that I would want to alert on. Then below that, I have my various patch groups. And so if I have, let's say, 3 distinct patch groups here, alpha, beta, and then production, I can go ahead and have my different servers assigned to these policies. And the benefit of this is when I go to approve patches, we go to the pending bin here. Just to make this easy, I will just select all the Windows patches right here and approve. And I get the option to select what patches, or sorry, what policies I actually want to assign or approve for my policies. And so in this case, I'm unchecking select all. Hey, maybe I only want to approve these for my alpha policy. This is one of those situations where when you make a change to a policy setting, like I'm about to right here, this is not going to propagate. This is not going to do the trickle down thing. This is kind of an exception to how policies typically work. When you approve a patch for a policy like this, you are approving only for the alpha one right here. Anything that inherits from alpha, not that these are, but if something inherited, it would not actually approve it. So that's something to be aware of here. You can see, I guess we don't have the parent what the heck radio station, oh, we do here, but like right here, if I approve for the what the heck radio station policy, I've got a child policy inheriting here, but I'm not approving for the child. I'm only approving for this one right here. So this is a contradiction in how policy settings work otherwise. Right here, nothing trickles down. Right here, whenever you make a change, the inheritance doesn't matter. This is only for the patches that you select right here. So right there, that's a good example of some alternative policy setups there. So right here, we're going with something a little different. We've got a server policy, and instead of having a server policy for each distinct organization, we're instead breaking this up based off of patch approvals, and then we've got a device type here for the domain controller. When we click into a policy, these are the settings that are going to be your concern whenever you're setting up your policy and you want to be aware of what do I need to change? This is, I think, a common question that I've heard a lot of over the years is, when do I diverge with my policies? Do I just have one for each organization? Do I need to have one for each location within an organization? Where do I need to create all of these policies? That's a key question. Yeah, unless we changed it, Chris. As far as I know, that's still the way it works. Is that you do not the approval of the patches does not trickle down. So hopefully, I'm not sharing incorrect information here. But that's been my experience in the past. Is they do not trickle down. If somebody has any direct information here that contradicts me, now would be the time to put it in chat. But when we look at a policy and we say, when do we need to create additional policies? You need to look at these settings on the left-hand side and decide what is going to vary across your different subsets of devices. This is why I say understanding the different device types that you're going to have under management and creating those specific device roles first, that's key to setting up your policies. Because without understanding the different device types under management and what those device types are going to need, yeah, that's
Ooh, well, we need a policy for when Jeff drops off. Here, he's back. He's back.
my what happened.
You were saying yes, and then you just disappeared. Spooky, very Halloween.
Okay, is my screen still here?
Your
Yeah, no,
screen is
it's
still here. Everything else is running perfectly. You just kind of went into a black hole there for a second.
I had really bad internet issues on Monday. I was down for about 8 or 9 hours. Maybe this is a little bit of a remnant of that, but
mm,
yeah, I'm back. I'm
I
here,
I
hopefully.
just thought you had ghosted your servers. Okay, he's back.
Yeah, I literally ghosted. Uh, so I don't know how much was missed there, but basically, okay, I'm still here. Basically, people always ask, when do you want to diverge on your policies? And it's always going to go down to what is going to vary here. That's why you need to have a good understanding of what device types you have under management, where they are going to be different. And so, what is going to change between your various device types? It could be your conditions. What are you going to alert on? Are you alerting on domain related services? You probably only care about that for a domain controller. The scheduled automations that you're going to run. What custom fields do you want to have updated on a regular basis? Are there any other unique device provisioning automations that you would want to run so that as a device joins NinjaOne, it runs a certain set of automations? This is a key one here, patching settings. What is going to change with your patching settings across these device types, different patching schedules? You can see right here, my update schedule at 5 o'clock. I might not want all of my servers to go ahead and install patches at the same time. I might want to vary that a little bit. And so you need to take all of that into consideration when you're building your policies, because this is seriously going to impact how you operate your environment on a regular basis.
So,
Now,
Jeff, we
sorry, go
have
ahead.
a quick question from Andrew in the chat. If you add software to the software patching inventory on a parent policy, does that trickle down?
If you add software, yes, but same deal with the approvals. I don't believe the approvals, if we see this at the dashboard, those would not trickle down. But adding software within the policy itself, anything you add in the policy itself should trickle down. It's the approvals at the dashboard here. So if I'm approving for patches, you're approving explicitly for the named patches that you check here. That's the aspect that's not going to trickle down. So adding them to look for it, that absolutely will work in policies. It's the approval specifically, the manual approvals specifically, that are not going to trickle down. Automated approvals would trickle down. Anything in policies would trickle down. It's this specific aspect that does not.
Thank you.
See, and I'm just not going to be able to breathe anymore. You guys are just going to think we're going to drop. So, what happens when you want to vary a particular setting inside of a policy, but you don't want to have to create a whole bunch of additional policies? This comes, I think, really in two forms. One is that you want to create some sort of alert or some sort of automation that applies to some organizations or some subsets of devices, but do not apply to other ones. So, for example, right here, every condition that we have, this is all going to deploy it. Um, this is all going to deploy to all of your devices, and it's one-to-one. Service goes down, we raise an alert. In this case, we're actually responding with an automation to try and fix the issue. But this would apply to all devices on the policy, and it would also trickle down to all of our inherited policies. Now, you can absolutely go into a child policy. And so, for example, in Herrera Technologies, I might not want to have some of these conditions be in effect. This is the same layout that we saw earlier with device level overrides. Over on the right hand side, you can see everything that is inherited. If I disable something, like for this organization, I might not care about BitLocker status, and I might not want to audit that. You can see I disabled that. I get that override. I can hover over this overridden button and click the revert button, and that will go ahead and put me back into compliance with my parent policy. Now, you don't have to just do a straight on-off. It's not just a 1 or a 0 where you turn something on or off. You can actually make modifications to conditions, and that will also create an override. So, for example, here, let's go down and say I want to change the CPU monitor. 15 minutes, a little too tight. They're very intensive at this location. And so 30 minutes is going to clear out some of the irrelevant noise here and let me know when I actually have a problem with a device that's being quite heavy on the CPU. And you can see that in the background here, even though all I did was change a time frame, this is still active, this is still enabled, it's still overridden. And that means that I'm still not going to receive any changes from the parent policy that's set right up here, the 1A Windows Workstation policy. I am not going to receive any changes on this one particular line item here. And just as a note here, you can do something really simple and just uncheck and then recheck. And even though I haven't made any actual functional change to this condition, I just turned it off and turned it back on again. Uh, Ironic. You can see that that also created an override right there. And so if you just want to make sure that this setting is not impacted by any changes to the overall parent, this is a good way to do that. Now, let's say, and let's go back to our top level here, our Windows Workstation policy. Uh, we've launched a feature this year that I think makes condensing your policies much easier, especially with complex automations. And that feature is compound conditions right here. And so what a compound condition is, it allows you to take multiple attributes into account before you raise the alert. So with our standard conditions, it's 1-to-1. Service goes down, we raise the alert. With the compound conditions, we can say if a service goes down and it's a particular operating system and a particular piece of software is installed, and all three of those criteria are valid, that's when we want to go ahead and actually raise the alert and trigger something to happen. Now, you'll notice that this is not a complete recreation of conditions. So you can see that there's not things like CPU usage here or hard disk usage. It's just what we see here, but we do have plans to continue to expand this over time. So you will see this start to or continue to grow. It has already grown substantially, more than doubled in size since the beginning of this year. We initially launched just these top three. And so this lets me do this kind of workflow. Let's say I want to push Google Chrome to all of my devices. There's a couple different ways I could do this. I could just do it manually, but that's not really automated. I could do it as a new device provisioning automation right here, where I'm automatically installing Google Chrome, but there's no granularity with this. Any device that's on this policy is going to receive this, and it's going to be installed on their device. I would have to create a child policy and then do some mapping and do some inheritance for a specific organization to make that change there. So absolutely doable, but if I could, I would prefer to have a consolidated policy where I can make all of these uh, uh, decisions. And I can see some chatter here. Definitely reach out to the sales engineers. I was a sales engineer for a really long time, and then I was a manager of the sales engineers. So odds are pretty good that if you get an SE, you're still going to get somebody who I trained. So they are very, very good and have access to all the same stuff that I'm showing you here today as well. So I would highly, highly recommend reaching out to your account manager and using the sales engineers. There's a lot of collective experience there that we make available to every customer, and it's good to get your money's worth and take advantage of that. I'm actually doing a training with the sales engineers next week, so still have regular communication with them. So again, I could do this in a myriad of ways. I could go ahead and actually deploy as an automation. I could do it as a condition here, but again, there's no granularity. I am not able to modify this or account for this for per organization or per location uh, changes without having to go and create a completely separate policy. And so what I've done in this particular case is I'm using a compound condition. My very first compound condition here is looking for the text Google Chrome inside of a custom field. And so what I've done here is I've created a multi-line custom field. You can see all my custom fields right here. And it's just called software to install. And what I do is I just put a comma separated list of applications that I want each organization to install. And so what I'm actually able to do is I can create this custom field. I can have it at the organization level or the location level or the device level. And all I need to do is go and import via the API or make that change. And now that organization will have this particular condition here valid. We can see Google Chrome is actually in those custom fields. And so what this would do is it would say, hey, our very first compound condition here is valid. And you can see that our logic here is set to trigger when all conditions are true. So our first condition has to have Google Chrome as a text string inside of this custom field. If that is valid, we then proceed to the next piece of criteria. This is a good thing to remember, that compound conditions are evaluated in the order that you see here. You cannot reorganize them, so you do have to delete and add them in the particular order that you want to have them be evaluated in. And I will show you in a second kind of a more complex example here. But what I've done here is, okay, assuming we have this text in our custom field, my next criteria is Google Chrome installed on the device? And so assuming that it is not, that would be our second criteria. That is going to go ahead and raise that alert because we now have both criteria true or valid. Google Chrome is inside of our custom field, and then Google Chrome is also missing as a piece of software from the actual endpoint itself. And that is a way to then trigger an automation to install Google Chrome. And the real benefit here is I've set this up as a policy condition, and this can be something that trickles down to all my devices because the custom field is the controlling factor that I'm using here. This is how I'm actually deciding the per organization or the per location or the per device attribute. I'm controlling it completely separate from policies. It's not tied into it at all, aside from this section here. So this is a great way to kind of have a more simplified policy structure, but you're controlling various automations via custom fields at the organization or location or device level, or even the end user level now, I should mention. And so this is, yeah, just a great way to keep your policy structure more simplified, but still have some complex automations under the hood. I'm actually going to switch tabs here and go into this policy here to show you a more advanced example. And so this is actually upgrading Windows 10 devices to Windows 11. And so what I've done here is I've added in my very first one, which is actually, we actually now have a native condition for this, but all this does is check the Windows version, and we're looking for just Windows 10 devices. Because obviously, one of the first criteria that I would want to eliminate here is, well, I don't care about Windows 11 machines. I only want this to apply on Windows 10. So that's the first criteria that we're crossing off there. Any Windows 11 devices, anything that's not Windows 10, they're automatically excluded from this. What do I care about after that? Windows 11 compatibility. Is the device able to be upgraded to Windows 11? And so this looks at the custom field and says, hey, you have to have the past check for Windows 11 compatibility in the Windows 11 compatibility custom field. This is populated by the Windows 11 compatibility script that we have inside of the template library. And so right there, I have now knocked off 2 bits of criteria on my list. Has to be a Windows 10 device, has to be able to be upgraded to Windows 11. I'm adding on an additional safety switch here, which is checking for a particular tag. If the Windows, you can see here, if upgradable is contained as a tag on the device, this will go ahead and actually be our third criteria. We'll say, hey, you're Windows 10, you're able to upgrade to Windows 11, and you have the upgradable tag. And that means that our final and last bit of criteria is time. When do we actually want this to be valid? We don't want this to be always on every 3 minutes, like this condition is currently set to be. We only want this to be valid during a certain window of time. And so what I've done here is I've set a maintenance window, and I've said, hey, every week on Saturdays between 3 and 7 a.m., that is your upgrade window to upgrade the device to Windows 11. The nice thing about this, as compared to a task is going to occur at a specific point in time, or it's going to occur every hour. With this method, you get the ability to add in that window. So you can say if the device comes online at any point in time between 3 and 7 a.m., it's going to run this automation, assuming that it hits all the other criteria that we have set above here. And so this is a far more complicated example here, but this is an example of how you can keep a simplified policy structure and still have kind of granularity with what settings are being applied. You're just shifting that complexity or that granularity away from having child policies and into having um, uh, um, into custom fields as an organization and location and device level. Chris says, shouldn't your custom field condition be first, else it's constantly running a script for the first condition? Absolutely. I think that you could switch that so it's the custom field check first. Obviously, this really shouldn't be a script anymore. I would go ahead and replace that with the actual operating system check here for Windows 10. But yeah, I would say, you could really make the argument that maybe the time should be first because you want to exclude the automation if it's between 3 and 7. For me, I found that this was relatively minimal. This right here is a constantly running script every 3 minutes, but it's also only like 10 lines long. So it's not particularly intensive. But I can certainly see the point, Chris, in having the custom field be first. But regardless, I think these are kind of interchangeable because they're probably both going to be running, anyway. Keep going here, and then I'll try to leave a little bit of, I see a couple questions, so I'll try to leave some time for questions at the end. So that's one aspect where you can consolidate policies and you can use the compound conditions to basically shift the targeting to custom fields and then reduce the need for all of the additional policies that we see here. Uh, Now, conditions is one of the big things that we see people sort of vary when they create additional policies. The other is patching schedules specifically. When does patching actually run? And so let's go back in here and go into Windows patches. So normally, for a very long time at NinjaOne, this is how you set up your patching schedules. You could only do it here. You could only do it inside policies. And so right here, if you wanted to have one customer or one group of devices on one patching schedule and another group of devices or a different client on another set or another schedule, you had to create additional policies for that. And that's not necessarily the case anymore. There's other reasons why you might need to do that, but it's not for just the scheduling alone. What you can actually do here is you can set your schedule to none. And so we can go ahead and I won't save that, but let's say in theory I save that. And I also did the same for my application schedule. I set both of these to none. And that means that we're essentially not running patching on a scheduled basis through the policy. Uh, it would only work whenever you initiated patching manually. So if we close out there and close out there, we have to come up with our inciting event for what is going to trigger patching to occur because we've eliminated the regularly set schedule inside of policies. One way that I really like is to use tasks. And so what you can do here is actually go ahead and create all of your various patching schedules that you have. You can go ahead and add in a patching automation. And you can see that we've got OS patch scans, which would identify new patches. And you have this for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And then you also have the OS patch apply, which actually scans and then downloads and installs the patches. And we have that for Windows, Mac, and Linux as well. And so what you can do here is go ahead and set your your patching automation. You can set your schedule. Let's say this is for Saturday, 9 p.m. We'll go ahead and say every week, every Saturday at 9 p.m. Let's go ahead and get that set up. And then you can set your targets. Now you can do this by organization. You can do this by device. Of course, these are static selections. It might be more beneficial to do a group. And so what you can do is actually create a group that targets all the devices that you need. This could be, again, based on organization. It could be based on location. It could also be based on custom fields. I have seen where what we've done in the past is actually create a custom field looking for or not looking for, but holding a date and time. And that is actually what we use to either create a task, to create create a group to create a task that targets patching at that particular time, or you actually just create sort of a script result condition like I did earlier. Actually, let's go in here with that check ninja time. and you're just looking at the custom field and saying, if you're at this time, it's time for you to patch. And again, that allows you to kind of completely detach patching scheduling from the policy and instead put it in custom fields. And again, that tends to be where we see the greatest variance across device types and where people have to create additional policies. It's with conditions, with what they want to alert on and then automate in response to. And then it is patching. Those are the two most common ones. And so those are two ways that you can go ahead and consolidate your policies and kind of maintain a more targeted approach without the policy complexity. Again, you are somewhat offloading this complexity just into other areas of the platform that might be a little um, uh, easier to manage. Now, real quick, I know we got 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure I have some time for questions. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about what the future looks like. Now, in the 11.0 release, which is the next release that we're about to start rolling out here next week in the Canadian instance and the Oceanic instance, uh, there is an alpha feature, and I want to emphasize that this is an alpha feature. This is not a beta feature. It is not an early access feature. It is an alpha feature. And as such, not everybody is going to be able to utilize it. Although if you're in Discord, you have a direct line to some of the people you can bother to get access to it. This alpha is called Dynamic Policies. It is in the alpha only for Windows devices. We absolutely intend for this to be something that you'll see across Windows, Mac, and Linux, but our alpha is only going to be for Windows for the initial development period, just because that is what most people who are using NinjaOne are managing. They're managing Windows devices. And what this is going to do is you are going to have all your policies that you see right here, but there is going to be a secondary layer, the dynamic policies. And this is going to allow you to apply certain segments of policies individually to override what is set within your parent policy. So imagine, and we will have to use our imagination here. Imagine if the reboot options was something that you could dynamically target, only the reboot options, not changing anything else, having a different customized message for every client. What if you wanted to have a scan schedule that was different? What if an update schedule wanted to be different? You would have the ability to assign these all as discrete chunks, as opposed to what we do today, which is we have this monolithic object called the policy, and everything that you modify is all a part of this one object. With the dynamic policy, you're assigning the slices of the policy, and you are able to target those dynamically by saying, hey, you have a certain tag, you have a certain assigned user, you have a certain assigned user role, you have a certain device type, you have a certain custom field value. And in the initial alpha, this is going to consist of patching settings. So you'll be able to say, if you're a domain controller, you automatically get this patching schedule. If you have a certain custom field value or a certain tag, you then get this schedule. And this is all updated basically every minute, just like the policies are here today. So as soon as a custom field value changes on a dime, you could have that correspond to a patching schedule change. The second aspect that is going to be included in dynamic policies is scheduled automations. And so you'll be able to go ahead and have scheduled automations in this 11.0 alpha. And this is going to go ahead and, again, assign one of these specific automations right here to devices based off of any of the criteria I mentioned earlier, like tags, like device role, like the assigned user, like the assigned user role, like custom field values. Now, there's going to be a difference in how these operate. There is both additive dynamic policies and there is conflicting dynamic policies. With Windows patching, you can't have more than one patching schedule within policies, right? And dynamic policies doesn't change that. There's going to be a prioritization engine to where you can say this policy, this patching policy takes precedence. And so if you have targeting rules that target a device, it's going to defer to whatever has the highest priority. Schedule automations, different. This is additive. We are going to condense and combine all your various schedule automations into one. So the conflict engine doesn't really apply to Windows patches. Ultimately, we want to do the same thing with conditions where they are additive and they just get stacked on top of each other. And so what you have is your overall policy, like we see right here. Then you have your dynamic policy slices, and ultimately you end up with a calculated policy at the device level, which shows you both your regular policy as well as what has been dynamically calculated to be added to it based off of your target rules. Now, that's kind of a sneak peek of the future. There is a lot more behind it, and I imagine that we are going to talk about this at great length. Probably Gavin is going to talk about this at great length when this becomes more widely available. So that's a kind of a sneak peek of what is coming around the bend. Again, I want to emphasize here that this is not something anybody can have access to right now. It may be very limited access in 11.0, but I imagine we will show you that we've got something on the way that is going to dramatically enhance the policy experience, and that means that I will almost certainly have to redo this webinar sometime next year.
Definitely. We'll be knocking on the door as soon as it's widely available so we can update all of you guys with that, which is a very exciting development coming up soon. So we are running low on time, so I just wanted to highlight two questions that have come through. One from NL. Why can't conditions have the option to run at user login similar to scheduled automations?
Yeah, so the regular conditions that we see here, these are purely always on. There really isn't an ability to schedule these conditions natively. You can only, when you set a condition here, the benefit of the condition is that it is always on and it doesn't turn off. If you wanted to have something occur at a specific time, you would probably do it as a task. The problem is obviously that a task, when you run at user login, it's just going to run across all devices that you've selected, and you don't necessarily get any granularity there with how you want to target it. One thing that you can do here is you can use compound conditions for this. And so what this would be is a script result condition that looks for a user logging in recently. We can go ahead and have this run every 5 or 10 minutes. And if a user has logged in, that would then go ahead and be one criteria that is valid. And then whatever your secondary criteria is, you would just add that down below. So it is absolutely possible. It just takes a little bit of scripting in order to make that happen as a compound condition. And just conditions, just as a design philosophy, they're supposed to be always on, or you turn them off if you uncheck the box. And so there just isn't the at user login capability with regular conditions. You can do it with compounds, but you do have to script it.
Amazing. And then we have this question from Real Run for Fun. It's a bit away from policy, but where do you set up software installs? And Straker gave a few tips in here, but we just kind of wanted to see what you would, from the maestro, the Ninja Maestro himself.
There are a lot of different ways to do it. You can see in the top right here, we would add in our installer. And so you can upload a DMG or a PKG on Mac, or an MSI or an EXE or an MSIX on Windows. And so you can see in here, I have my install applications. I've got a bunch of them in here. And so that's actually uploading the installers. And so in terms of pushing this out, there's a couple different ways you can do it. We saw earlier the compound condition where you can actually specify inside of custom fields. I think this is good if you have a very complex environment with a lot of different customers who are all getting boutique software. That's not necessarily applicable across many different devices. If you have a flatter environment and everybody kind of gets the same thing, the easiest is just to come in here and say, if a piece of software is missing, then we want to go ahead and push it out. And that'll happen at any time of day. It'll, again, be always on, so that as a device joins this policy, they'll automatically receive that setting. I always show that you can install software right here inside of a scheduled automation. You can see I'm running this once immediately. So as soon as the device does join the policy, it's going to run here. One thing I would caution against is don't create multiple run once immediately blocks that are installing applications, because they'll all try to run at the same time and it's probably going to fail. And so I usually like to separate my software installations into conditions separately, as opposed to doing it as a scheduled automation, but you can absolutely do this too. Another way would be as a task. And I like this method because you can use the device search menu to filter for only devices that don't have that particular piece of software, but you're able to control this so it happens at a particular moment in time. And so I come in here, I add in my installer for Google Chrome. I am using groups. I'm going to just have this repeat every hour right here. So every hour, any devices that I specify in my group that don't have Google Chrome, they're going to automatically get it. And so this way, I'm able to use these search filters at the devices menu to kind of automatically narrow down the specific devices that I would want to push out. I know I gave you 4 different answers there, so my apologies, but it really kind of depends on what your workflow is and what you're able to do. Are you able to push applications in the middle of the day or any time, or do you need it to be at a specific point in time? Do you need a ticket tied to applications that are missing? In that case, you got to do it as a condition. So there's a lot of variables there.
All right, so we're at time. Thank you so much, Jeff, for this. This is like one of those topics that I think that we could just continuously do this, because there's always so many questions. There's always so many like best practices and things that you can do to set these things up. And then there's always, we're growing and stuff. So people finding it out for the first time, or trying to, change habits and with the new updates and things. So appreciate it so much. Please join us in about a week, 2 weeks, on the 13th, November 13th. Our PM Josh Lambert will be here to talk about Intune and how to use that with NinjaOne. That'll be really exciting. And then last but not least, before we all sign off here, I just want to put this back up again. Join our Discord. It is the place to like continue these conversations, to continue having get your questions answered, and then to continue to bother Jeff if he will allow you to troll him. He's always very useful and helpful and giving us great things. So the Discord is by far the best place for all of those things. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, wherever in the world you are, and we'll see you on the internet.
All right. And a 1, and a 2, and a 3.